Welcome to Graying Still Slaying with me, Amber Topaz. This is Naomi Gale, and Naomi is a masseuse of the vagina. So, quite ironically, we met only a couple of weeks ago, it's less than a couple of weeks ago, at an event in Kent, in Margate, called Stretched Lips. It couldn't be, you couldn't make it up. So Stretched Lips is a poetry evening, and both myself and Naomi were performing poetry that evening. Now, personally, I was about to perform some poetry that is a little bit away from what people know me to be, which is kind of, comedic, sort of feminist, I would say, poetry. And Naomi was on before me, which was great for me because Naomi was speaking about her work. So without any further ado, I think we're going to have you explain exactly what it is that you do. Tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do for a living.
Well, thank you very much for that wonderful intro. I love that night because we were like both sitting in this like dark bar thinking, and I was thinking, am I in the right place? Like really to read my poetry about my vagina work. And I was looking around the bar and I was thinking, oh gosh, I'm not sure how it's going to go. And then I had no idea that that's what your poetry was going to be about as well, with your work. Because we were just sitting next to each other. And then when I got up and performed and then I sat back down and you were like, this is great. This is a great intro. I was like, I love this. And the room actually was really sweet. They were listening, and so it was a really great way to meet for sure. So yes, I also obviously live in Margate, and I recently moved actually a year ago, on the 8th of March. So that's tomorrow that I landed in Margate, and it's been wonderful to be working from here with my work because landing in Margate is very much, it's by the sea and it feels really grounding here and really nourishing, and it's a little bit of a slower pace of life. And I find that a lot of people that come into my space are kind of like seeking that out for themselves. So I work with feminine healing. So I work with womb spaces and vagina work, but predominantly my focus has really been on working with the vagina massage recently because the space holding and what I've seen from this work is just incredible, and it just feels like such a gift, and I feel like we should be talking about the vagina more. So that's where the work has really become, I've honed it into this really recently, and also I'm on social media sharing it quite openly and quite in a way that perhaps isn't necessarily being shared. So I went viral on TikTok, and this is where like the vagina work has really kind of evolved from. It's like people's questions and what people really want to know about it, and really seeing the need for this work, like the real it's so challenging because there's a definitely, obviously there's a place for going to the GP and having all this support, but sometimes there are a lot of feminine beings who feel let down by the system, and they need to find a space to kind of like verbalize what's happened to them, feel safe, feel held, and then have something that's tangible. So I obviously massage, or they can come to me online and learn how to massage for themselves, and then they go away and they integrate this work, and then they're able to do this as something that's a tangible tool, a self-care tool that they can then move forward with. So yeah, that's what I do.
Gorgeous. So I mentioned you at my show. I had a show on Thursday in Margate, Graying Still Slaying, and I gave you a shout out at my show, and afterwards someone said to me, is it sexual, your massage, is it sexual? So I think that they were kind of collapsing it with maybe this assumption of, people assume that tantra is sexual as well, but if you look into it, it's not that either. So I said, this was my response, and correct me if I'm wrong. I said, no, I believe it's myofascial release. I believe it's a healing tool. And, and there's so much going on there. There's so much trauma in that area as well with, birth, issues with, fertility, trauma, and the list goes on. So correct me if I'm wrong, but that was my explanation of what you do.
It's a perfect explanation. And first up, let's discuss the show before we go into that, because
Oh.
I came to the show and loved it. I loved like the holding of the space and like the way that you shared. I adored the songs. I was smiling the whole way through. I loved every moment of it. And I was so pleased that I made it out and I could come and see it. So you were a true gift on the stage. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Yes, it is a fascia release. And everyone always is like, what's the fascia? So the fascia is the biggest part of our body, really. It's bigger than the skin, and people don't realize that, because what's happened is that in the medical world, they basically like just cut through the skin, cut through the fascia, and got to the muscles and the organs, and they're like, oh, what's the fascia type thing. But now studies, and there are genuine studies that are going into it, where the fascia has a holding pattern, and it holds our emotions, because it's basically like water and holding in our emotions. And what we realize is that the fascia can become like tight, and then when it becomes tight, it creates a holding pattern around the muscles. And then the muscles, like when you're like lifting up your shoulders and they're like really tight, like up around your ears, and you've been stressed all day doing work, if you actually did like a lighter touch and more of a fascia release, then you would allow for the muscles to relax as well. And then within the root, it's holding a lot, because I always say, like, we're sitting on our root all the time. And so when we're sitting on our root, the emotions and everything, the holding pattern is generally just sitting in there, because it's the one place in our body that we don't go to. It's the one place in the body that we don't touch, that we don't massage, that we don't release. If our shoulders are tight, we will release them, but we don't within the vagina. And what happens is that we go through life thinking that not being able to jump on the trampoline without a little bit of wee coming out is normal, or feeling pain through having sex is normal, or feeling pain through and not being able to insert a tampon is normal. Although I could go on about tampon chat, so don't get me started. But it was like, but it's like all these things that are like deemed, it's like period pains are deemed normal, but we know they're not. So it's all these things that then really, actually, it's a holding pattern within the root. So it's the fascia release, the light touch that I do is not sexual in the slightest. We bring in the holding of Mother Earth. So we need to bring safety within the body. So I'm trauma informed. So we need to bring safety in the body, because people are coming into this space and they, like you said, they may have experienced some deep traumas. And we actually have, I think we've underestimated as a society how many feminine beings have actually been through something, a consent issue. The list is endless. And so what we do is we create safety within the body, we connect in with Mother Earth, and then I'm simply the connection to Mother Earth. I'm like the grounding cord in, plugging ourselves into Mother Earth, the placenta of Mother Earth, I call it, rather than the false placenta of life, which is like the busyness of like the technology and work life. We plug ourselves back into Mother Earth. And then we hold the most of the work, in actual fact, is just the energetics of literally having that connection, breathing in our mind's eye, like connecting in to our yonis and breathing in and down into that area. And when we're doing that, then we talk through anything that can be coming up. And because we're going right into the root, a lot of stuff can come up. A lot of stuff that we hadn't really thought about for many, many years, the thought of something that we might have dealt with. But because it's within the body, it becomes a somatic therapy. So it has to be moved through the body. So really interestingly, I had a client recently who I was asking a question, and they said after the session, they said, if you weren't in my vagina, like within my body, I'd have just said yes to that question in my head. But in actual fact, it came out as no. And this was the answer. The question was really deep and really raw. And she was like, then she cried, and she was like, oh my gosh, that's because you're moving this through my whole body, right? And I'm having to realize that this was actually a no, when normally I'd have said yes. So then what happens is that we continue to work through the fascia release, which is a light touch, which is if you're pressing through the skin and you press the muscle, and then you found that like bouncy bit in between, it almost feels like that watery bit, that's where your fascia is, and you can release that wherever, like all around your body. And that's what you're doing in the root. And then at the very end, we work with the womb space, and we integrate. And there's just absolutely nothing sexual about it. But because we're using the term vagina and we're using that word, everyone's like, it must be sexual. And it's like, well, do you go for a back massage and think that that's sexual? No, you don't. So it's just not the same.
It's what's in the collective consciousness, isn't it? And everyone's just, and it just shows, like, and I talk about this in my show, that we are in 2022, and it's still all a bit embarrassing and a bit awkward to talk about female genitalia, and particularly if you're a woman and you're talking about it out loud, then you're woo woo, you're out there, or you're, you know, something else. And it's biology. You know, we've all got one, so we need to talk about it more. And I'm Viva La Vulva. I'm like, let's talk about it. Hence why you're here. Yeah, I've actually had myofascial release on, you know, on my body. And out of all the different body therapies I've had, it's been one of the most powerful. I'm very in tune with my body, but I also trained as a dancer, so I've always done body maintenance, as I call it, rather than, like, you know, it's not a middle class, I'm going for a massage. It's like, it's been essential for my well-being to have body treatments and to be able to function with lots of different, I've had lots of different injuries as well along the way with what I do for a living, because performers tend to push their body very often, push through it with adrenaline and go on stage and, you know, be high energy, and it almost like pulls more energy out of you eventually. But no, I absolutely, so glad I bumped into you. I believe that it was meant to be. I think, you know, this work is essential. So how did you get into this work?
It's a long way around getting into it, but I think when you're on this path and you start like training in more and more things, you realize that there's so much out there, right? And you start finding the people that you need to train with and find. But the start of this work started right back when I was actually a primary teacher in the classroom. So I was teaching year sixes. So they were like year 5 and 6. So, you know, the 12-year-olds who were, you know, hitting puberty or ready to hit puberty. And what I realized was that there was a lack of holding within the classroom with these children. And it was really upsetting for me, because I was constantly trying to like fight the system and be like, I think we need more sex ed within the classroom. You know, this is like life skill. Like, this is what we should be teaching, rather than worrying about the SATs that we have here, you know, the tests and everything like that. And no one was really listening to me. And I went on a course and I saw like 35 teachers, and I was sitting there and I was thinking, hold on a minute, if there's 35-ish teachers sitting in here, and I know that I had a big class at the time, I had 35 children in my class, and they've all got, say, 30 children up to 35 as well. Like, that's a lot of children that we're impacting here. And the teachers were so flippant about it. They were like, oh, I just condensed it into a day, like too embarrassed to talk about it, couldn't face like properly doing it. And I was like, this is wild. But I know that the education system has to be changed from the root up. And I know that now there are a lot of charities going into schools and doing all these wonderful things. And I knew that it wasn't necessarily, I knew that there was something for me, but it wasn't there. It wasn't in the classroom. But I didn't know what it was at the time. What happened was I had to leave teaching to go part-time because my husband got diagnosed with azoospermia. So he doesn't have any sperm. And that meant that we were in our 20s trying for a baby, and knew that this was going to be a pretty dramatic choice that we had to make. So the NHS did not support me for 9 months, which was quite ironic because that's how long it takes to brew a baby, right? So for a full 9 months, and it was hell. And I was made to feel like, even though the problem and the challenge was with my partner, and we knew that, and it was really an easy fix. It's like, oh, no sperm. Okay, we need sperm, you know, that's literally it. But instead, it switched on to me. And it was all about how I wouldn't be able to carry a child. Why? Because I literally haven't been given the chance to carry a child. I had a consultant tell me to my face that I would miscarry. And I said, how do you even know I'm going to miscarry when I haven't even had a chance? And they were like, well, because your BMI is too low. So they started pulling in my weight. And as somebody who struggled with body dysmorphia in the past for feeling too slim, this was a massive trigger for me. And so I spiraled really quickly and there was no support. And I asked, how would I get support here? How can I get support? And they were like, well, you can get support when you get inside a fertility clinic. And I said, well, when will I see inside a fertility clinic? Because I haven't even seen in one, right? I've just been to you and consultants and GPs, and no one's listening to me. And no one's offering us any fertility treatment on the NHS because my BMI is too low. I've had a personal trainer to put weight on. I've been told to eat cake. That isn't the way to put weight on, FYI. So all this like negativity. And they were like, well, you can see inside a fertility clinic when you put weight on. And I'm like, this is a vicious circle that you're like creating here. So we had no support. And in the end, I got recommended this clinic in Greece. And it's a Greek clinic in Athens. And I went over there on a whim to have IUI, which is where they insert the sperm at the right time. And she was like, oh, darling, just come over when you're ovulating next and we'll just, insert the sperm. And I was like, really? Just like that? And they were like, yeah. And I was like, right, okay. And then I said to my husband, well, I'm going. And he was like, well, I can't get time off work that soon. He was like, next week. I said, don't worry about it. It probably won't work anyway. Like, having 9 months this. And I was like on the adrenaline of it, right? Anyway, it turns out it did work. And I have my beautiful son who's now 5 from that experience. But what I learned was as soon as I got over there, I met a group of women, and they were from Ireland and the UK, the Ireland and Britain. And it was really nice. And they took me under their wing. And a lot of women who are in their 40s go to this clinic because what they've been through is the system here, and they've almost been chewed up, spat out, and they've got no other option but to go to a clinic that actually gives a shit. And so what happened is that I ended up learning that actually just what we need is to be heard and listened to and understood a little bit more. And so when she said, darling, come over and just have some sperm, that's exactly the sort of words that you need. And do you know what she said to me on the phone as well, which made me realize how hard it had been here and how little anyone had listened to me, was she asked me how I was. And I broke down in tears because not a single person had asked me how I was through the whole process. And it was gut-wrenching to know that that's all I had ever wanted in 9 months. And when I then had the pregnancy, I was like, oh, it'll work again. No worries, I'll go out again. And then I ended up in this spiral of like thousands of pounds in debt, trying to achieve like the sibling for my son. And in the end, we switched to IVF rather than IUI. I had my womb scraped out in a Greek hospital on my own. Like I went through it all just to try and achieve a sibling. And in the end, I had twins. So a true gift.
Wow.
And so everyone says, oh, it's buy one, get one free. And I was like, yeah, I kind of needed that after like spending 35 grand. So yeah. And then after all of this, I thought, well, I hope my period pains aren't like, giving birth to twins, like all vaginally, and having my son was 8.4 pounds. So, and the twins were both 6 pounds. So that person that said I would miscarry this is why I'm so annoyed by the flippant language that is used around women's health, because telling me I would miscarry, and then of course that was in my brain when I was pregnant with twins, but then I ended up full term and I had to be induced because they have to get them out before placenta failure, but and then they were £6 each, so I was carrying £12 a baby, and they were really healthy babies. So these flippant words, this language, this like quick encounters that these women are experiencing, they don't understand how detrimental they are to women's mindsets and how they can spiral women into this like fear of like, quick, I need to freeze my eggs because I'm, or quick, I've clearly got endo. Oh no, wait, you don't have endo. Oh wait, you've got inflammatory bowel issues. Oh wait, no, do you? I don't, it's all these like, just like, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. And then I was like, well, I've given birth now, so surely my period pains are going to be okay. And they were worse than ever. And I was on the floor. I had the babies crawling around me when they started to come back. They were crawling at this point and they started to come back because the night feeds were less. And I was like, oh my gosh, and I've got ovulation pains. Is there any rest? So I went to the doctors, and what did they say? Well, go on the pill. And I'm like, I don't want to go on the pill. Like, that's just masking it. And so what happened was I got angry. And then I was like, I'm going to start training in things. So I started training in things to try and learn more. And I was having a lot of women coming to me asking me, because I'd been through the IVF process. And then I realized, after going through all this like process and doing loads of trainings and loads of different modalities over the years, that actually what I really, really want is to empower women and empower them to have a voice, so that when they're in a scenario where they're being made to feel that they don't deserve something that they want, like having a baby or like birthing a business or whatever it is, you know, we birth things all the time, that they feel like they've got that empowerment within themselves and within their bodies, a full body yes to whatever it is, and that this is who I am. And so that's when then the vagina work came in, because this vagina work, the work of the root, really gets into what it is that's holding women back and where the root of the challenges can really be, and then allows it to be somatically moved through the body. And what I've seen is real, like, women just coming out feeling really empowered and like, yeah, I can totally see what we've talked about, and I can see where I need to go, and I feel like I've got a tangible tool, whether there's a physical challenge or whether there's not. And it just feels really empowering to be able to give that to women after my journey, basically. So that's a long
Thank you
way.
for sharing your story. It's so passionate and so powerful. There's so much medical shaming, you know, you were body shamed, many women are age shamed, there's also body shaming the other way around. You know, a friend of mine is what you'd call obese or morbidly obese, and you know, and then they get body shamed around that. Everything's just got all these levels of shaming, and like you said, as soon as you plant the seed of doubt, then you become like concerned about it, don't you? And mildly obsessed about it, because your journey was about having a child. And then all these seeds have been planted that you're underweight, that, you know, that you're going to have a miscarriage, but no one's checked out your fertility in the first place. A friend of mine had a child at 46. And the whole time was told that they were a geriatric mother. And you and your partner, what a beautiful choice that you made as well. So, you know, there are always choices. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a big story. But I always feel like if you're truly working in your passion, it comes from somewhere, and it comes from your own journey, and then that's what makes it so powerful. You know, if you've been through that, then it already gives you a status of like, if I can do this, so can you. If I can get in tune with my body, so can you. And I'm all about, you know, empowering the feminine. Nobody would be here without it. And all the shame around it, you know, all the shame around bodies and pleasure and, you know, and pain, that we can't talk about those things. It just doesn't make any sense to me. And my education, my sexual education, you know, it was just so you know, I think we watched a video, you know, and you know, whose sperm were like racing up, you know, a bit of skin on a video, you know, and it was all very awkward and embarrassing. And when we had the period conversation, we were given a pack of tampons, and there was never a conversation about pleasure. There was never a conversation about consent. There was never, there wasn't even a conversation about sexually transmitted infections. You know,
Oh,
it was just, not when I was at school. It was literally condoms if you don't want babies, no condoms if you do want babies, kind of, you know, energy. So obviously things have moved on since then, but because we are interested in this, and because this is your work, and in a way this is my work, but I do it through a different medium, we feel like, oh yeah, it's getting out there, people. And then you do a show like I did on Thursday, and there's so much shock in the audience and pushback and embarrassment, and I'm always really surprised, particularly from women, when they're a bit like, ooh, you know, oh, this is a bit, ooh, and you're like, really? But then it's what's in your stratosphere, isn't it? So sort of my friends and the people in my stratosphere is like attracts like. So we do talk openly, and I do attract people like you into my life, and I do attract empowering women. So we have these conversations openly, but you forget, like, everybody else is not having these conversations. So how do people find you? Where are you? You're online, you've got website.
Yeah, I'm just on my website is my name, like this is naomigale.co.uk, and then I'm on Instagram at this is Naomi Gale, and then I'm on TikTok nowadays, so at this is Naomi Gale _. So yeah, I'm around, definitely.
So what's it been like being on TikTok? So personally, the reason I'm asking this question is because I believe you went viral on TikTok. And that is a double-edged sword, isn't it? So beautiful that more people become aware of this work, but there's a dark side to that as well, isn't there? And how are you coping with that?
Yeah, and I think so when it first happened, I was really shocked. And you were just saying about how you're like, but everyone's having this conversation, right? And you're like, oh wait, no, hardly anybody's having these conversations. It's just the people that you mix with are having these conversations potentially, and maybe a few others, because this video hit a large audience, and it was some brutal comments. There's also a lot of comments that are like, prove it. We're in this day and age now where everything has to be proven, that we can't allow ourselves to open our minds and hearts to other things, unless it's like really like in the science. And I think that's something that I think will change in time, but also will be supported with science as more people start doing more investigations into this work. I truly believe that it's not going to be in our lifetimes, but eventually.
Well, that's everybody going into the head, isn't it? Into the masculine, exactly. And not going into the body, which is exactly. The feminine. It's people trusting their bodies rather than having to, logically understand it. It's about dropping back into the bodies, isn't it?
Yeah, and there's so much disconnect, and TikTok is kind of a good example of that, because it's such a high-paced like platform that everyone's like scrolling quickly, and it's a really great escape on TikTok, and that's what people I feel are doing a lot at the moment. It's an escape. Where can I go to escape? Because if I have to drop back into my body, then I have to really feel, and actually I don't feel safety within my body because of X, Y, and Z. So actually TikTok is a really great place to escape, but it also has got a lot of educational videos on there, and I didn't realize, like, when you find your niche on there, that actually there are a lot of people who want to learn and want to know. And so I now take it with a bit of a pinch of salt more than I ever did. Before I was like really taken aback and I had to take a bit of a breather. And then TikTok were banning my videos from being posted for a bit, even though they were educational. And then they've sort of like, now they just review them. And I think somebody's checking my videos and has like, oh, here's Naomi's videos type thing now, because they just get put out. But what I really learned is that there's a different generation predominantly on TikTok. And when I've been doing my workshops recently, I've had really young girls coming into the space, 21-year-olds, 20-year-olds. I had a 17-year-old who was coming into the space. And I'm like, gosh, when I was 17, I was wearing a sheep jumper and climbing bales of hay and just like totally like not in connection with who I was at all. And so I think that it's like fascinating that we have this generation who are coming through who actually do really want to learn about their bodies and really do want to connect in. And I'm finding these girls on TikTok, because that is predominantly the generation on there. And they're reaching out to me and they're saying, hey, like, can you help me? I've got it's painful to have sex. It's painful to insert a tampon. I can't ask my mum. I've got no one to talk to about this. And so actually it has been a true gift to be on there, to be able to know that I'm reaching this audience as well. So yeah, you're right, double-edged sword in so many senses. But the more I'm getting into the groove of it, because this was very recent, it was only in November that this all happened, that I went on there, and I've now got like 30,000 followers on there, which is insane. but it's now just really like me getting into the groove and finding what people want to know and finding those people. And I know the videos that are going to trigger, because what happens is you can say something very triggering that creates somebody to have to really question something, basically really question themselves and their standpoint, and that will allow a video to fly. And it's like, do I want a video to fly today? Have I got that? Have I got the strength today to like cope with the comments, or am I just happy just to reach the audience and to want to know a little bit more about coming to a workshop maybe? So yeah.
Oh, how wonderful. That's so wonderful to hear those age groups have got somewhere to go to and have those conversations, because it is that, isn't it? It's like, I think at that age you don't really talk to your friends, and certainly don't, most people don't have that relationship with their parents or teachers that they can have those conversations. So hooray for you. I'm so glad that you exist. You're out there doing this amazing work. I'm absolutely thrilled to have met you. I am a total, I'm totally into this work. Just getting into your body and getting comfortable with the uncomfortable, and really excavating beyond who we've been taught that we are, and like getting to the truth of who we really are through our bodies. So moved to listen to your work, and I am definitely going to have a treatment, and then I will speak about it and let people know, because there's no point me chatting to you and then be like, and then not sample the goods.
I'm excited.
And also, we are all a work in progress. We have got so much information overload now, but we've also got all that information and inflammation that was
that as
Freudian
well.
slip. That we've got all that information from our biology, from our ancestry, from our lineage, and from the collective of being a woman, and then we're just trying to exist at the same time and just be here and survive, and simple things like that as well. We're just trying to survive and thrive, and and feel connected to ourselves and other people. And I think the more connected you can get to yourself, the more you feel connected to other people, and the more that you empower other people. So I'm so thrilled to have met you. I could literally speak to you all day. But yeah, so thank you so much for that. I will put all your links under this video so that people can find you and learn more about your work. And and I look forward to having a session with you, and then maybe we'll have another conversation about that. But I'd love to speak to you again further down the line about your work as it develops and as it blossoms and as it grows. So thank you so much for spending the time to talk to me today, Naomi. You are glorious, and viva la vulva!
Thank you so much, Amber. It was a real treat. Thank you.